Good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's NBA Sharp Betting Breakdown here on the Advantage Sports Betting Podcast. I am your host, Michael Fiddle. Today is February 28th, and today we have a loaded show with so much strategy to go through on this card and two max bet positions, some of the biggest action that we have on the entire season happening on this card, and even an edge that we felt was so big last night that it was worth even parlaying it. So normally on this show, whenever you hear me use the word parlay, it often comes with a few other words that are often said in the same sentence. Dumb as fuck. Today, we are going to review how to do some parlays in a wise way. It's actually the first parlay that I've placed this calendar year, the second parlay that I've placed this NBA season. So we will review all of the games, every side in total, go through all of the normal great components that we do. And there is one towards the end of the show that is going to be about strategies and how to get good action on parlays. Now that I'm looking at this card, the best ones are actually towards the end of the slate, and we are going to work through this chronologically like we always do. So whether you are listening to this today, Friday, and here for Friday night's games, thank you. Of course, we appreciate you guys being here. But if you are coming back to this, or if you are getting to this podcast late today, I still think this episode is going to be really good for a lot of the strategy stuff. So if you're coming to this over the weekend and you just got here on Saturday, hi, thanks for being a day late. You'll still learn a lot coming through today's card. Let me bring in professional poker player Drew Johnson. Let me share the FanDuel odds screen. Drew, I have been giddier than Joshua, getting ready for today's card. Feeling like this is going to be one of the best ones that we've done because we have some incredible action on these numbers and some really good things to talk about and weave in strategy wise.
Yeah, I'm excited for this one. This is pretty close to like our most hammered card of the year. Very close to it, if not the most hammered card. So this should be an absolute banger, and we've got so much to talk about.
Chad saying Fiddle looking locked in, even on like 3 hours sleep because we were up capping these spots. I'm locked in because we have been looking at these games for so long. Quantitative saying shout out Ian. The daily shout out to Ian is so well deserved because he is a legend behind the scenes for us. JB is here from the Philippines dancing to get down on it, as is Peasy. I sent in anyone guess the legs for the parlay that I actually bet. Mo Money chimes in Suns money line. So Mo Money's got some good points. Let's see if he's right on this one as we work through the card. Remember, anything that we do say was placed as a best bet is a reflection of the WAP chat, and that is where these plays are released. It is $100 a month to get all access to the picks in real time last night, and then come to the show and reflect on our positions and talk about how we are handling them, why we place them. We give you guys $50 back simply for leaving a review and a full free month's credit if we ever have a losing month. And we were looking at today's card, Drew. We said, it is the last day of the month. It is a plus 10 unit month to date, coming off the heels of a plus 19 unit January. And we could have said, you know what? We have this thing where you give a full free month if we ever have a losing month. So we should probably risk less than 10 units tonight. And I was worried instituting that rule, like legitimately. I was worried instituting that rule that it would change my own mindset of handicapping. We have a massive card today, way more than that exposed on the line. I think 12 units already down.
Like that, yeah.
Places to get more action, playbacks to talk about, and so much more. So a lot of volume today on the last day of the month. We are not going and settling for plus 10 units. I want more. Every single day is an opportunity. When there are a loaded NBA slate, we can't take these things for granted because there's going to be summer times, and obviously we'll be here doing the WNBA this summer, but there will be days this summer where there are simply no games to break down, no action to be had, no money to be made. because part of what generates such high returns for us in the NBA is 30 teams playing 82 games.
Yeah.
In the NFL, you get what? 32 teams playing 17 games. In the W, you get 13 teams playing 44 games or whatever they do this year.
Is it 50? Something in
40.
that range.
Okay, let's do this slate. It starts with the Denver Nuggets facing the Detroit Pistons. I guess the strategy component that you would weave into this one is buying high, selling, or buying low, selling high, looking at the travel spots, looking at the schedule spots for this one, and determining how you evaluate this market with the Detroit Pistons as 1.5 point favorites against the contending Denver Nuggets. So the Pistons are, let me pull up the standings, in a comfortable 6th seed right now, 4 wins up on the Orlando Magic and avoiding that play-in. The Denver Nuggets, on the other hand, are fully entrenched as a top 3-4 contender in the NBA or in the Western Conference. So you look at this game and you say Pistons minus 1.5 point favorite. Okay, why would that be? The Pistons are playing phenomenal basketball right now. They have won 8 in a row. They are coming off of a win against the Boston Celtics where they smacked them and won comfortably.
Yeah.
The Denver Nuggets are on the second night of a back-to-back on the road after a loss to the Milwaukee Bucks. So situationally, this lines up for a Detroit spot, but that is very, very, very much priced into the line. We have seen this really bounce all over the place. And when you looked at the injury report, you saw some, more risk on the Denver side with them on the second night of that back-to-back. And I would say Aaron Gordon is really the one that you'd be watching as a needle mover to spread and total in this spot. And he is deemed questionable, probably a true 50-50 for this one. I have no action, Drew, spread or total. Any thoughts, Detroit versus Denver?
I took a little Detroit money line / Pistons -1. I think it was fairly late last night at Bet Rivers, and it looks like the majority of the board is now -1.5. Are there any -2s yet?
There are some -2s popping up. I see it right now. Circa
Yes,
Detroit
circa.
Pistons -2. DraftKings, BetMGM 2.5 right now. Offshore's 2. Bookmaker still -1.5, -114. But yeah, definitely some 2s starting to pop up for this Piston spot.
Yeah. I'm just taking that at, I think I have 2/3 of a unit, not even half a unit, just a little less. And it's literally just for market move. I was watching this line fairly closely last night, as we were watching all of these lines fairly closely last night. I don't know if y'all heard, but we were in a voice chat at like midnight my time, probably 1 p.m. Ian time, 9 p.m. your time, for a solid 2 hours. Just, I don't know, looking at this card,
Capping every single game, every single spot. Drew, are
adding
these
units, subtracting units, just like it was actually
I don't think
great
there was
time.
any subtraction going on. It was a lot of addition yesterday when you look at the card. Would you still play any Detroit Pistons -1.5? For me, it's a total skip of just, I don't know whether to sell high on Pistons, buy low on Denver, avoid the schedule spot. So I just skipped it all outright.
Yeah, I think it's just a little bit of a tougher travel / schedule spot for the Nuggets tonight. Obviously, they've played a couple of games on the road. At least they had a couple of nights off between the Indiana Milwaukee game. But is that right? Yeah, that's right. Okay. I'm a little worried about where the Denver Nuggets are at the moment. Little bit concerning the last couple of losses they've taken to the Lakers and the Pacers, getting beat by the amount they did in both cases, one being at home. And then obviously Indy's been doing very well since sometime mid-January, I think, is when they kind of hit the switch and started ripping off some wins here. I expected Denver to be better than this during this stretch, especially with all their guys back, and they just haven't shown anything. It looks a little bit like Jokic is tired, not working quite as hard, certainly not on the defensive end. I've seen some highlights of his defensive effort over the last couple of games, and it hasn't been good. Now, it is Jokic, and they ask him to do so much on offense that I understand him wanting to conserve energy on that side of the floor. But at some point, they got to get some stops, and it's going to be tough for them to win these games if they aren't performing on the defensive end.
Peasy says, high volume Fiddle. I don't know if that's my voice high volume or the card high volume, but the card is certainly high volume, not in this game. Pistons or nothing, says Drew. Let's move on. The Portland Trailblazers are a 2-point road favorite at Brooklyn after playing the Wizards and covering most recently. Both of them played the Wizards. The Portland Trailblazers would cover. The Nets would not cover in their most recent outings. Trailblazers -2 in this spot. I believe it should be -3, 3.5 if they were to have Deni Avdija and Jeremy Grant active for this game. Yesterday, it is priced at -3. Those two people both hit the injury report. We get word that Cam Thomas is coming back for Brooklyn and is removed off the injury report and going to play. And this line goes all the way out to Brooklyn Nets -2 on those drops. Well, that has been completely faded by the market with no updates on Avdija or Grant. So this has been sharp action that is coming in on Portland, fading this news, saying, let's see if Grant plays. There's no real injury there. He finished last game. And so is this just a situation where it's a night of rest? Is this him just popping up on the injury report and he's going to end up being good to go? Deni Avdija was hurt against the Wizards in what was a revenge game for Avdija. Obviously, he was drafted by the Wizards and then traded to Portland in what appears to be a massive steal for the Portland Trailblazers, acquiring Turbo Avdija, one of the best nicknames in the NBA as well. So we're seeing the total pop up to 220. That's in large part because Cam Thomas will be back. And then on the Portland side, because we don't have the news yet, you do have a just assumption or an indicator from the market that this is sharp action coming back in on Portland and fading the concept of the Brooklyn Nets returning a very high usage player in its first game, right? So how much is Cam Thomas really worth to a spread? Well, probably less than his full value in his very first game back. Is that going to be partly minutes restriction? Is that partly going to be getting used to the new teammate situation? I don't think Cam Thomas has really played much since the trade deadline at all either. So
No.
like hasn't really played with without Simmons and without with D'Angelo Russell there. And so I know D'Lo won't be playing today, but some of those trades and getting rid of Dorian Finney-Smith and all those things. So interesting things to watch in terms of reintegrating Cam Thomas. Cam Johnson will be playing, so the Nets will have both of the Cams. But I believe still a Portland spot and probably somewhat actionable considering the sharp action that's come down. Drew, are you fiddling around over there because you're getting more Portland action in?
No, I'm just looking at Cam Thomas. The last time he played a game was the 1st or the 2nd of January. So he has been out for quite a while.
Yep.
The one thing I will say is he doesn't like of all the players in the league, bucket getters are probably the easiest to reintegrate, right? Because he's so ball dominant when he gets the ball and he just is looking to score that obviously his shooting might not be there, but it also like he might not miss a beat on that front too. But I'm certainly thinking that he's going to still have his usage up, even if he is minutes restricted. So I just don't think that he'll be as hard to reintegrate as somebody like Paolo or somebody who's so integral to the
point of the offense and
Yeah.
the playmaking beyond just, hey,
Yeah.
here's the ball, go get a bucket. We're setting a screen for you, but that screen's for you, not for you to come off of it and create a little bit. The one thing that I will say to that, Drew, is what you don't want coming back as an ISO scorer is a handful of Tumani Kamara minutes against you. Like, dude
Yeah,
is
that's
an
true.
absolute menace on the perimeter defense. And so we're seeing a lot of these moves happen now.
Portland matches up really well against this squad.
Yeah, and before we were live, Drew, it was 1.5, and now it's a universal 2.5 on the board, 2.5 at Circa and the offshores, 2 minus 115 at bookmaker. So if you're like just going with where's the sharp book sitting this, and is there any value left on the board, the -2 minus 108 here at FanDuel, probably worth actually taking. This was a full unit released for us in the WAP at -1.5. And then a bunch of the news happened, and we were actually sitting on a minus CLV ticket, and I was totally getting ready to explain how to operate with a minus CLV ticket. And instead, okay, there has been some sharp action coming back in on the Portland Trailblazers, and actually a nice spot to have a minus 1.5 now. The next game on the list is OKC versus Atlanta. Drew, I truly have nothing for this game. Like, no bets, no strategy, no opinions, really. And despite this game, like, obviously being another opportunity for us, there's so much else on the rest of the card that I don't really have much to say at all. So anything to say OKC Atlanta, and then we'll just move on.
I took Ricochet over 15.5 points, rebounds, assists. Let me just have a look.
I'll bring it up for you. What were you seeing that made you took it? Why were you looking in that direction? Give the cap a little bit.
Honestly, I was looking at the BetStamp screen and just saw that there was an EV play / edge on that specific number, whereas the rest of the board had 16.5s. So I just kind of blindly taking that edge. I did check with everything I would reference for looking up player props, and it seems like it's an okay spot. Like, I don't think it's like the best spot in the world or whatever, but with the edge that BetStamp was showing, I decided to take it for half a unit. So, and that's my standard bet on a prop is half a unit.
What was the props? You can't get as much down because it's a smaller market. So whether you're betting to the limit or not, like, it's not surprising to see those as smaller bets nonetheless. Drew, what was the line that you got on Ricochet? Because it is 16.5 now.
I got 15.5. It does look like this might even go higher. I'd be worried about playing the 16.5 after we've already seen movement. Let me see.
Oh. Yeah, the best line, Drew, is even a 17.5 plus 105 PRA, so probably worth skipping it if it's.
Yeah, I would be hesitant to play anything on that to tail me on that. Having that 15.5 is kind of key. So yeah, sorry that one didn't get.
Very important.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on. The Cavaliers are taking on the Boston Celtics in Boston. Another marquee matchup on a Friday NBA night. Probably a nationally televised game. I have not checked the TV schedule. I will not be around to watch these games tonight. Very sad that we have such a loaded card, Drew, and I'm not going to be around to watch the games tonight. Spread opened on this one 3.5 on Boston and has come down to 2.5. Now, is that action on Cleveland, or is that injury reporting and repricing sensing that Jaylen Brown is still questionable? He missed last game. Drew Holiday came back and played last game, but he is questionable as well. So if I'm looking at that and we say Darius Garland was removed from the injury report, Jaylen Brown missed last game, still there, Holiday on the injury report again, then I would assume that's the large reason for the 1-point move. And for me, this is Boston or nothing in these spots. We continue to like Boston in the second half of the season. We continue to like Boston in these marquee matchups. So if Jaylen Brown plays, if Drew Holiday plays, you're probably going to see this spread go at least back to 3.5, and I would say probably closes around 4. But that largely hinges on Jaylen Brown news, which I think is truly 50-50. I bet Holiday plays, so that one I feel good about. But Jaylen Brown 50-50, and definitely hinges on that. Drew, with it sitting here at 2.5, is it worth still playing Celtics regardless of the Jaylen Brown situation? because it's still probably going to be Boston -2 without Brown. And then if he plays, it probably pops back up to 3.5, 4. So I'm just wondering if there's a little bit more value to be gained than risk to be had and value to be lost if it were to go for you versus against you.
I'm hesitant. I like the Cavs right now. They have been rolling. Looking back through the matchups they've played like the teams they've both played recently are actually, they both played New York. They both played Toronto recently. And in both cases, the Cavs did considerably better against those teams. Like considerably better. Beat the Raptors by 23, beat the Knicks by almost 40, whereas the Celtics only beat the Knicks by 13 and Toronto by 10. I do think the Cavs look scary. And I'm going to give a shout out to Simmons, who I was listening to his podcast yesterday. He was saying, I know everybody thinks I'm trying to reverse jinx the Cavs by saying they're good, but they're just that good, and I'm really scared of them. If he's saying that as a Celtics fan, and he is the number one Celtics fan in the world, other than maybe his own father, I'm concerned as well. And I think the Cavs, they haven't beaten the Celtics yet this year, have they? I think the Celtics won both matchups, or maybe I'm
Cavs
wrong.
took the first one, Celtics took the second one.
Okay. Both close games, right?
Yes, Cavs were getting destroyed in one of them and mounted a ridiculous comeback, and I think it might have flipped the other way. But yeah, sounds like we're on opposite sides and no action here. So let's keep moving
definitely nothing.
Okay. Another one for me that I find pretty light. I'm trying to move quickly so that we can really hammer the ones that have really great strategy, which is really New York, Memphis, Pelicans, Suns, Timberwolves, Jazz, Clippers, Lakers. All of those we have really good action in and a lot of stuff to talk about. Again, Drew, I have nothing Toronto, Chicago, but you're a resident Raptors guy. So any thoughts, plays here? We did give out an under 235.5 on the total. I will see where that sits now. It is 234.5 pretty much across the board. 235 at bookmaker if you are in Vegas and can bet those things. I do still like the under in this spot.
Yeah, I like the under too. Toronto's been an under team for a little while now. They've hit a couple of overs over the last stretch, but for the majority of this, they've been a slower pace since getting their guys back, a little more methodical on the offensive end. Still playing good defense for the most part, even without Pirtle in, though he is back finally. He did play the other night, I believe. I might be wrong about that. I know I saw a highlight of him, and I don't know if it was from a recent game or not. Let me just check. I do not see him on the injury report. So we do have Scotty Barnes as a game time decision. I would say he's more likely to not play, but we'll see. And Vucevic also a game time decision. Sounds like he might be out more than in.
Ian has him as doubtful.
Yeah. So I do like the under. I know that the most recent game they played. Goodness. So many tabs.
We have Indigo saying we're using Bill Simmons as a reason to make bets. Shaking my head. No, Bill Simmons was not a reason to make a bet. We were referencing him, or Drew was referencing him while he pulls up the recent games for Toronto Raptors. We were referencing him to say he says he's scared of the Cavs. So it was reason for Drew to say, okay, a guy who watches every single Boston game has an opinion. I should listen to that opinion as a reason to stay off something. But we have zero bets on that game. Base God Bill says if we're going off this season, it's Cleveland or nothing. So maybe Base God Bill is Bill Simmons and he's here.
Oh, that'd be sweet.
What's up, Sims?
How are you,
Cedric
buddy?
says, yo, lurkers, doubters, haters, make yourself useful and hit the like button. We love you too. Thank you, Cedric. Appreciate that. We do have some other great comments that I will definitely have to get to. Like, is it worth teasing something that for sure needs to be talked about? Some good props stuff to discuss. Drew, the caveat for Toronto stuff is like, and this kind of weaves back into this the Simmons take. You're wearing a Raptors hat.
Yeah.
You watch every single Raptors game.
Not every single one, but probably more than 3/4 of them.
Drew, you watch them when it's a 19-point game in the fourth quarter with 3 minutes left because you want to see your boy Jacoby Walter.
Yep.
So
and I love seeing them cover backdoor spreads too.
Where I'm going with this is sometimes if you're an in-depth, knowledgeable fan, you can actually know a little bit more than the market. And personally, I love to know where other people's fanhood is and where their rooting interest lies, because those are probably some really, really good spots to say, hey, I like this is a classic fade of my team spot. Like this is the classic night where they don't bring it. Or, hey, they're clearly going to get up for this one. You heard what the coach was saying and what the beat writers reported and what locally came out in the paper and so on and so forth. You've had Billy Walters saying in interviews that he used to have local guys collecting newspapers in different markets and studying the sports section to see if there were hints and quotes and things that would indicate play style on the very local level. So having those are legitimately edges if you know how to action them, not just bet an opinion. We never bet an opinion, but if you know how to action these kind of rooting interests and tendencies that you could develop starting to know teams so freaking well, then those can be really good and profitable long-term. So I love knowing who has Knicks season tickets and will be there to say, this guy's questionable. Let me watch him warm up, and I'll text that person. I'll always come to you with Raptors things. I'll always go to Ian with injury report questions because he's so dialed in there. So find out where people are dialed in, because in the same way that Ian is really dialed in with injury reporting stuff is the same way that another person is really dialed in with the Cleveland Cavaliers or the Memphis Grizzlies. So being very team focused is a very, very good thing.
Yeah. Just to speak to that point, I capped baseball last summer and I broke even on every team. Well, not every team, but on the league as a whole, except for the Toronto Blue Jays, because I was watching the Toronto Blue Jays. 66% of their games I probably watched 5 or more innings of. And it got to a point where some of the guys I was in contact with and capping with throughout the season were like, they just immediately text me when they saw the Toronto Blue Jays line out. And they were like, what do you think of this? And I was like, oh, we have this pitcher out for our bullpen. And this guy hasn't been hitting well. And the lineup down the middle has been struggling, I think. And especially if they were like a home favorite or something, I was like, oh, this is a spot to fade them. And I did very well doing that over the course of the summer with the Toronto Blue Jays. I could have I would have made more money, I think, had I just bet the Blue Jays and no one else in the MLB. So I think that speaks to your point.
I was thinking about doing that for the NFL this season and just doing a one team approach or a one division approach, because there's also so many markets, Drew.
Yeah.
Like there are so many. Let's do football, for example. Every single player's receptions and yardage and rushing and props. And then there's longest punt. And then there's longest field goal. There's kicker points. There's literally everything you can imagine for these games, right? You can study specifically one team and one game and one division incredibly in depth and still probably accumulate the same amount of edges that you would just studying every team and going every game. So sometimes if you just really want to specialize, especially if you're working with other people, right? Especially if you could be like, oh, I'll cover this division, you cover that division, and we'll share information, then that would be a great thing. Okay, I'm going to skip Pacers versus Heat. Pacers have been an incredibly sharp side. Drew, do you have anything to say for it?
I thought we had. Did you?
I don't have anything. So
you don't have anything? Okay. I picked them up. I picked them up the same time I did the Blazers, which
Okay.
was very early yesterday. Very early. Like
Okay.
line release.
I want to skip it because at
Okay.
this point, I don't think anything is actionable. Pacers
correct.
are a very clear, sharp side for this game. Let's move on. It's all the way out to 4.5. Please don't bet the Pacers. We missed the sharp wave and window that has come down on them. The next 4 games are incredibly important strategically. They all offer some amazing things to talk about for the NBA and for the back half of the season. So we are going to clip this section of the show and make it its own weekend podcast, because a lot of the games that we just went through are games just to go through for Friday night.
Yeah.
And say, okay, Portland -2, still actionable at FanDuel. Toronto versus Chicago under 234.5, still actionable by the market, but the rest of it is pretty much where it is. The next 4 games have really important strategy. When is good to do parlays is going to be part of that. So let's work through this and let's use these 4 games, Drew, as a lens to break down some NBA betting strategy and hit all of these different points and show why we have really good tickets on all of these things. Let me reemphasize, if you are watching, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and if you want access to all of these picks in real time, come join us in the WAP, which is linked to the YouTube video, the podcast description, and on my Twitter bio. Okay, let's start this with the New York Knicks visiting the Memphis Grizzlies. This is a 4-point Grizzlies favorite at home on a line that opened at Memphis -2.5 and was an obvious play at Memphis -2.5. Now, why would that be an obvious play in Memphis? Let's talk about a few things. First thing I want to talk about is kind of matchup hunting, understanding where you can find matchup advantages and how to find matchup advantages if you don't know them offhand. You should recognize patterns in line movement when it comes to certain teams and patterns in outcomes when it comes to certain teams. We talked strongly about the Pelicans being a matchup advantage against the Spurs, especially without Wembanyama, because they had the defense on the perimeter to throw at De'Aaron Fox, and they had the offense on the interior to attack without Wembanyama. And so we even went reverse of the normal zigzag NBA theory when 2 teams play each other in the same arena 2 days apart. Just take the reverse winner. And we went Pelicans. And what happened? We won both because we were found the matchup advantage, identified it, and played into it. That exists for the Memphis Grizzlies in this spot. They are a clear matchup advantage against the Knicks because of their way to attack from the perimeter and score from all 5 positions.
Yep.
That is what Boston can do, and that's why Boston rips apart New York. They can play with a 5-out spacing. Every single position can put the ball on the floor and get to the rim, whether that's Brandon Clark or Jaren Jackson Jr. doing it. They are incredibly switchable and versatile on defense. They're using Brandon Clark in their last 5-minute lineups. Zach Edey has been a little bit spammed in getting attacked in pick and roll situations. So what the Grizzlies are doing are playing more BC minutes alongside Jaren. And now this Grizzlies team is a completely switchable, versatile, shooting, attacking, spacing kind of monster that plays incredibly fast. So that is going to be a matchup advantage. We saw them take a lot of sharp action right before the game against New York the last time they played in Madison Square Garden earlier this season. Now, the subsequent result would be that the New York Knicks would crush the Grizzlies in that spot, but the results of one game don't loom larger than knowing the kind of basketball angle and the patterns of the market. So it was very loud to me that Memphis took such sharp action in their previous game versus the Knicks that when I saw the line at 2.5, when I knew that Memphis, I think, closed as a favorite in New York last time they played, this was Memphis is going to be favored by more than 2.5 at tip-off, and I felt it would be closer to 4. Even texted somebody that I think it should be 4, and now we see it at 4. So pattern recognition in terms of line movements for specific matchups. I legitimately think, especially when there's no injury news, right? We don't have any breaking injury news for this game. So note that the lines are moving hard towards Memphis. Now, it doesn't totally work in this spot because this is the last time these two teams will play each other this season. But as an exercise moving forward, note which teams are clearly taking action, not on injury news in the NBA. Because sometimes those become replip.
Ian, clip this.
Patterns that you could repeat.
Replicable.
I was getting there. Ian's cracking up in the back too. All that good strategy just to get to that point here too. Cat and Hart are questionables, aren't they? Let's pull up Ian's injury report for this game, and we will see that Desmond Bane is questionable, Karl Anthony Towns questionable, Josh Hart questionable, Mitchell Robinson upgraded to questionable. So I believe the date that they were targeting for Mitchell Robinson was March 1st. So we'll see if he gets back on the 28th instead, a day early, because that's been the date that's been rumored for weeks. And we'll see. Bane and the other guys, yes, it definitely is a little bit of value on the Knicks players that are listed questionable versus Memphis, but the spread would still remain around 3.5 or 4. Definitely shouldn't have been 2.5.
No, 100% not. Looking at the last game these two teams played, it's pretty clear that Memphis lost literally on turnovers. They had 26 turnovers in that game to New York's 10, which explains the blowout, right? Because New York shot well, but they're going to shoot well off 26 turnovers, right? So shooting above 50% from the field when you have steal after steal and run out after run out isn't that difficult. I just think that this game goes considerably different in Memphis, especially.
Would you still play Memphis -4?
I would absolutely consider it. There's a 3.5 at MGM, but it's -118. Oh, is it 4.5 already?
Yep.
Yeah, I would consider the -4, especially if you think Hart or Cat is missing this one. Specifically, I think the more important player against Memphis is Hart because of his on-ball perimeter defense against Bane and Morant and Kennard as well, right? And just the fact that he's a complete Swiss Army knife for the Knicks. He does a little bit of everything, as we've seen him getting triple doubles over the course of the last couple of seasons. I think he has like 4 or 5 now, maybe even more than that. He's just a really key piece for them. And if he's out, the matchup advantage gets even better for the Grizzlies. So playing the 4, a little bit of asymmetrical injury risk towards the Knicks here, and I don't mind it at all.
The one remaining 3.5 is -115 at ESPN Bet. So that would be the best line. And then 4's -110 everywhere. So yeah, I do still think that could be slightly actionable as well. With these massively high totals, also you expect a little bit more variance in the scoring output, and so the numbers could be a little bit longer. All right, let's move on to the next one. Main thing is starting to learn pattern recognition and matchup advantages within these spots. Let's talk about the Pelicans versus the Suns, Drew. We use max bets and the term uners to describe when we lay 3 units down on a max exposure spot. We have 5 units on this game, 3 units on sides and totals, 1 unit on a parlay. So let's take this one very slow. Let's work through it and say, why did we come to this? Why was this the first reason that I reached out to you in the first place last night and being like, hey, do you have time? Because there's a massive opportunity that I want to talk to somebody about. And you were like, What? And then I told you the opportunity, and then you were like, please just take a second to think about this a little bit. And I was like, no, hurry up and get your ass over here and give me confirmation that I'm right. All I wanted to hear was that I'm right. I didn't want this. I didn't want rational thinking. I just wanted, it's like when someone comes to you with their venting of issues, you just want to hear, you're totally right. I'm sorry. That would totally suck for me too. I couldn't even imagine you going through that. That's all I wanted to hear, Drew. No resistance that you gave me, but eventually I would convince you.
Yes, you would.
That hammering the Phoenix Suns was worth it. That parlaying something with the Phoenix Suns in it was a good idea. And now we will go through it, but where the lines sit currently, was I right?
Yeah, you were definitely right.
And because the amount of money that you got down on it, a little I told you so is warm and welcomed.
Yeah, I'll take that.
Okay.
Give it to me.
I told you so. So,
all right, perfect.
Here's what happened. And William, I will get to your question in 1 second. Here's what happened. The Suns and Pelicans played last night. This is a second night of a back-to-back for both teams in Phoenix against each other. The Suns were a 6.5-point favorite at close yesterday, with Bradley Beal popping up on the injury report and being out, and with Zion being active. Now, I started tweeting last night this a sun gif and a hammer emoji or a hammer emoji. I started tweeting that there's an error line out there. People started commenting Suns. I said yes. People were asking me, is Zion out? Like, that shouldn't be a question. No. That shouldn't be a question that you ask me. Like, go do some research and remember that Zion said this to the press 1 month ago.
How exciting is it for you that there's no back-to-backs coming up, that there's a stretch of 6, 7, 8 games in a row where you can just keep playing?
Let me make this clear to everybody out there. If I can play in the back-to-backs, I would. I physically, yes, I can. But I work for the Pelicans. They have decided that based off the numbers, it's not smart to do that right now. So, if that's what they feel, I'm rocking with them on that. But yes, if I could play in a back-to-back, I would.
So that was 1 month ago. And right now, I think the Pelicans are 16-43. So here's the information that we have as we're sitting on this last night. The Suns reopen at -6 after closing at 6.5, having Beal be a kind of uncertain late scratch, having Zion be an integral part of a triple-double victory for the Pelicans, and saying that the team is the reason that he's not going to play back-to-backs. What reason would the Pelicans organization have to change tune on that 1 month later when they're 16-43? Drew, if Zion were to play tonight and get hurt, and we had all of these clips coming out and going, you literally just said as a team that you weren't playing him, and now he gets hurt as the team's 16-43, traded Brandon Ingram, have DeJounte Murray done for the season, and really have essentially packed it in. Like, that would be the worst look. You talk about everyone fired type of mistake being made. So Zion is not playing tonight. He's not. It hasn't even been reported yet. It is still labeled as doubtful. Motherfuckers, it is beyond doubtful whether or not Zion Williamson will be out there, and we love to back Zion's on props. We are massive Big Z supporters over here at The Advantage.
Do you want to hear something really terrible? Just to interrupt you for a second.
Go for it.
If you'd hit that BETSTAMP shop yesterday, I was.
You would have given out Zion triple double.
Yep.
Okay.
That was what the EV
second time this week. I'll make sure I hit it.
Second time this week. Hit the shot.
We've been playing a lot of Zion overs. We love Z, but if we can find the right spot to say Zion is so clearly not playing and this is priced in as him playing and still shorter of a situation where they also won on the first night, and we know that this trend stuff, that the data on this is you like to zigzag, and especially when the favorite is the team that loses on the first night, because they're going to come back extra harder, and they're the team that's more talented and priced that way, and it often reflects that way. So taking the favorite ATS after they lose on that first night of the back-to-back, this little mini baseball series doubleheader, is no-brainer. Drew, we played this full unit at -5.5. That's when I started calling you and being like, what is going on? Why is this pricing there? It moves to 6. We played it again for 2 units on the 6. It's sitting there at 6. We're looking at the over-under at 237.5. And we're like, we should also be playing a full unit on the under 237.5, because if Zion's going to be out, do the same thing with yesterday's total. The line closed at 237. So why is it 237.5 if we're expecting Zion to be out? And then second night back-to-back where the teams know each other and the scouting reports are a little bit more clear and the defensive assignments are a little bit more understood. Are you kidding me? So, unit at 5.5, 2 units at 6, unit on the under at 237.5, and then I threw out the craziest idea in the world to you, which, let me give credit where credit's due. Drew, this was not my idea. Someone else I was texting with about this stuff was like, is this a spot where you actually parlay it? And I was like, yes, 100%. So shout out to that person. You know who you are if you're listening. And it was like, yeah, you should parlay -6 and the under, because if this is a spot where both lines are, you're playing them early and they're both going to gain closing line value, then yes, parlaying those, and if they gain a staggering amount of closing line value, then the value gained by placing the parlay is actually worth it than the value lost by obtaining the multipliers that trick people into thinking parlays are great and you could win so much money. In real life, the multipliers are complete horseshit and dog shit, and they are a ripoff. But if you're doing this and you're attacking lines that you have a insanely high degree of confidence in gaining closing line value, and a good amount of it, and you end up coming through with this and saying you're parlayed at -6, -108, and an under 237.5, and where the board sits right now, 7.5 -112, over under 234, 3.5 points lower on the total, 1.5 points on the spread on the most important numbers, and some VIG payment on it. This was an absolute no-brainer that it was actually a good parlay, and holding this ticket right now, Drew, go to your DraftKings account, because that's where this was placed. See if they'll give you a positive value cash out for the parlay. Let's see if DraftKings even agrees. That was a fucking good parlay, guys. Well done.
I know they thought the Clippers one was, we'll get to that in a second, because they were offering me like a quarter of what I placed down in profit to just get off the ticket.
John says, if Zion does end up playing, should we dump the Suns tickets at game time? Yes.
Yeah.
Sure. Or at least some of the exposure. I would dump some of it and just ride some of it, but it'll go back to 5.5 or 6. And then you're going to be able to dump it without a Polish middle, which means at any spot where you would be able to lose it. So
they are giving me a positive cash out
protection. This is crazy. JB says full uner on Suns -5.5, -101 VIG. Oh my God. JB, I would have whipped out both of them and gone double uner there.
Yeah, that's insane. Well done, sir. That's the sickest line that we all saw, I'm pretty sure. I actually do have positive cash outs from DraftKings right now on those parlays. And DraftKings always charges you 10% to cash out of a ticket.
They are the most egregious cash out value book. We still appreciate the offer because there's rare times when it does become worth it. very, 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 very rare times, equivalently rare as good parlays become options. This is the second parlay I've placed this NBA season. It is the first I've placed this calendar year. So likewise, but it's still good options. I'm still glad parlaying is an option out there on the sports book. I'm
Still
not
a tool,
glad
right?
about the way the content industry explains parlays and promotes those dumb fucks, but I do appreciate them being there for options when they pop up for myself. William asks, is it worth playing Suns minus 3.5 under 238 teaser minus 110 at this point? No. Absolutely not. I will go into it a little bit. A teaser in the NBA is never, ever, ever worth it. And I believe it is one of those hard and fast rules where I don't even know if teasing the numbers where we got them and then gaining the CLV would really even be worth it, Drew, to have it like, Suns minus 1 and under 240, whatever, because we got a better number. No, there are way too many possessions in an NBA game. There are way too much variability and standard deviations are too high in these spots compared to football. So in football, when we look at outcome ratios, and it's only ever worth it to do in football on spreads, not even totals. And NFL totals are probably more likely or just as frequent of outcomes as NBA spreads. So NFL spreads are twice as valuable, 2.5 times as valuable, 3 times as valuable on the most important numbers than NBA spreads. So no, the possessions are way higher in NBA that it does not make it worth it. Also, if you were going to be doing that now as a way to catch up to the market that's moved, you're still paying for the movement of the market. Yeah. This still reflects what the current lines are. This does not allow you an indirect way to still get in. The indirect way to still get in probably doesn't exist.
No, I don't think so.
Maybe it exists in a prop market by taking someone on the Pelicans, alt overs in some way, because when Zion's out, but you'd have to nail it. It's going to be a lot more difficult. You can pay for it with like a Suns money line at this point, which probably still has value. But other than that, no, sign up for the WAP. And that's the way to get in on the next one when this pops up. Drew, the last time that we did a NBA parlay was NBA Christmas.
Yes.
And we didn't do it because it was Christmas. Spurs Knicks, exactly. And we played Spurs plus 9.5 and the under 226.5. I believe that game closed Spurs plus 8.5 and a total at 221.5. I believe it was
dropped
5
like 8 points or something.
5 points of spread of total movement and 1 full point of spread movement. That made that a no-brainer positive EV parlay as well. MJML, Michael Jordan's money line, says KD shot 13 threes yesterday. That's crazy. KD came out after the game yesterday and said, I need to play better. They asked Kevin Durant, what cures the Suns' ails? And he says, I need to be better. So when I was looking at this and also knowing that quote and knowing Zion was unlikely going to play, and here's Kevin Durant saying, I need to play better, and he does play on the second leg of back-to-backs, this was a no-brainer. We have Michael Jordan commenting in fraud to MJML because we know who the real Michael Jordan is, who's always here in the comments. But I do want to go back to John's comment. If Zion does end up playing, do we dump the Suns tickets? Yes. Part of identifying asymmetric risk is being able to hammer it, and when it doesn't go your way, dumping off those tickets. Now, you can't just do that every time you notice asymmetric risk and say, I'll just dump them all, because in the long run, you'll end up dumping more things than value obtained, and then you'll get yourself in a trap where you're paying for vig loss more often than you're cashing the big tickets. But if you get good at identifying those spots, then yes, know that you do have an out in dumping tickets if news does not break your way. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Minnesota Timberwolves versus the Utah Jazz. And let's start this by showing the clip of Anthony Edwards' ejection yesterday. He receives an ejection on the court against the Lakers yesterday. This is also Anthony Edwards' 16th technical foul, which quickly made the rounds on social media. But if you know that means Anthony Edwards is going to be suspended because the NBA has a league policy where if you get 16 techs in a given year, then you're suspended for a game. So let's watch Anthony Edwards, because the main thing that me and Drew and Ian did, because this news came out while we were in our chat room powwow capping these games last night, was go watch the clip, because if there's any chance that this gets rescinded, because the league will review it, because the league wants Anthony Edwards to play. Who the fuck is watching Timberwolves Jazz if there's no Anthony Edwards in that game? Not me, not Drew, not you. And we're the most hardcore NBA fans. So the league wants Ant to play. So they're going to look at that tape and go, should we rescind it? Should we, give him some slack here? We would end up watching it and being like, there is no way this gets rescinded. Here is the ejection, or part of it that mattered last night.
Remember, they have the dual technicals. He's out of the game.
That's number 2.
Wow. Anthony Edwards has been tossed out.
And he's not leaving the court in a timely manner. So the fine may increase because he is not leaving the court.
Plus, that's his 16th technical of the year. Yeah, he lost his head just for a second there.
Then he throws the ball in the stands.
Yeah. He is as frustrated as it gets. What a huge loss for the Wolves.
He won't leave the court in a timely manner. This might increase the fine. And now he's throwing the ball in the stands. Ladies and gents, Anthony Edwards is not getting that technical foul rescinded.
Nope.
That's a well-earned technical right there. So Ant was going to be out. Mo Money says, what about him throwing the ball in the stands? Yeah, classic. Yeah. That would be a big reason why this line has dipped all the way down to Minnesota -2.5, because when that happened yesterday, Drew, it was Minnesota +7.
-7, yeah.
Or yeah, -7 on the road at Utah. You knew it was going to shake the market. It shook it, and it reopened at 4.5. While we were digesting all this, we saw it at 4.5, and we still said, oh, that's probably should be a go. Also, you had to consider the rest of the injury report for Minnesota, who is in the middle of playing that first leg of a back-to-back, and DiVincenzo out, Randall out, Gobert out. Now, is Mike Conley also going to show up as out on the second leg of a back-to-back? So there was a lot of that asymmetric risk that we so often talk about, all on the Minnesota side. And we knew that these questionable tags existed for the Jazz when that price came out. So it was a reason to say, okay, let's go back to the board. Let's see if 4.5 still has value. We felt it did. We played 4.5, played a little bit of money line. Now see it down to 2.5. Definitely think this one is priced out.
Yeah.
But key thing to be aware of there is it's very rare to use it, but know the league policy of being suspended for an extra game. It still goes into effect with Anthony Edwards the rest of the season, because I think every other tech, he is suspended another game. So every time he gets 2 more technical fouls, he's suspended a game, even if they're in different games and it's not an ejection, like technical foul next Tuesday and then technical foul a week and a half later on a Wednesday, he's suspended for the next game. So that will come back into play. And if you see spots where Ant gets a tech, do your checking. This used to be a Draymond assignment. This used to be a Luka Doncic assignment. You used to be tracking these things late in the season. Rasheed Wallace was before my time in the gambling sense. But I remember seeing him and knowing that he would miss a game towards the end of every calendar year with most techs in the league. And it got to the point where Rasheed was like, Rasheed would do nothing and just had the reputation of give him a tech. This line is moving to Timberwolves -2 across the board. If you still want to scoop up a Jazz +2.5, that could be a side that you look at. The total was 225.5 when the Ant ejection happened, and it's up to 226.5. So for me, that's really a sign that this spread and total movement where it is now, that Gobert is definitely still out for this game. Total moving up, spread moving against the Wolves. That is Gobert 101 right there. Maybe you're looking towards Dillingham props. Maybe you're looking towards Naz Reid type of stuff, but expect a big youth effort out of the Timberwolves tonight. And Jazz plus 2.5 and Jazz money line might actually still be actionable. Let's move on. Drew, do you have anything to add to this one, or should we move on to Clippers Lakers?
I think I like the money line on that spot. I think it has the most value at all non-sharp books. So DraftKings has that plus 120. They also have the 2.5 available at minus 108 as well, though. So you might consider that as well. I would still put in a third of a unit on the spread and a third of the unit on the money line right now if I wasn't already exposed as much as I am. I think I'm even more exposed myself than the WAP is.
Yeah, you are. You definitely are. And that's what you listed is pretty much my exposure on the game. So small bets, but grab some Jazz and Jazz money line. So hope the Utah folks are singing tonight as they get there and they realize Anthony Edwards is not playing and their team actually has a chance. Okay, let's move on to Lakers Clippers. Battle of LA. Clippers back in crypto or staples because they've been playing this season at the Intuit Dome. So a road game for the Clippers, but a no travel spot for Clippers and an incredibly familiar arena. Drew, I wonder what's happened to the locker room. That was because it used to have a Clippers locker room, a Lakers locker room, and an away locker room. And I believe they used to do it where when it was Clippers home games, it would be Clippers use Clippers locker room, Lakers have to use the away locker room. And vice versa. So I would assume Clippers going to Lakers will still, even if Clippers locker room exists, will not be allowed to use Clippers locker room. Very weird stuff, but funny things when teams share a stadium. Never happened with Knicks Nets because they were always separately in New York. But the Lakers are on the second night of a back-to-back. We just talked about Anthony Edwards getting ejected from the Minnesota Timberwolves game. They're playing against the Lakers. And so there was automatically going to be that asymmetric risk that hangs out with a Clippers-Lakers line posted and the Lakers being mid-game. Now, this would become a spot where we got down another max bet. I think we have, 4 units on this line. So not only a max bet of 3 units being the normal max, 2 spots where we did more than that and had reasons to break those rules. And when we look at the card right now, thank God that we did, because all of these have playback value and we could just reduce our exposure with opening these positive middles, which sounds pretty complicated. But when you beat these lines and you know you're going to beat these lines and you could play into them with some authority, then it's unbelievable, and that you should do that and you should break your rules and you should use exposure just to create a middle. Do I want 4 units on Clippers? No. Do I want 3 units on Clippers and 1 unit both ways on a positive middle? Sure, absolutely. And we'll talk about what those actually look like in a second. But Rui Hachimura would go down with a non-contact injury.
Didn't look good.
Did not look good. We will play that clip in a second.
He's quite important.
Especially Pat Bev agrees. And then Luka is dealing with a calf strain. LeBron is dealing with hamstring and foot stuff. And they're on the second night of a back-to-back when this team is rolling. Yeah. And, Drew, if you're schedule aware, they also get the Clippers a few nights later back in the same crypto arena. So this is a repeat matchup of the LA teams in LA at the same arena too. So a classic rest and then come back the next time harder spot brewing for Luka or LeBron, or at least one of them. There was a very heavy sentiment that one of them would miss. Then Luka would end up getting a little hobbled in the game as we were watching it. Jackson Hayes would go to the locker room. He would return, but was limping around there too. And you saw all those things and you're like, Rui's really hurt.
Yes.
Luka's limping.
Yep.
LeBron sat out the All-Star game and then played the first back-to-back coming out of the break because Luka sat that game. So maybe LeBron sits and Luka plays. Is Luka hurt though? Or do they both sit? Is Jackson Hayes even going to play? So there was so much injury question marks that were popping up for the Lakers during the middle of their game while this game was priced and while Clippers plus 1.5 and plus 1 was hanging out there. So it was no brainer to smash. But if you look at the total, it was 220.5 on the total, Drew. Now it's 219.5. Probably pretty glad that we just did this from a hammer the spread and not also do the parlay here too. So all worked out really well. I'll play the Rui injury, and then I'll get back to your thoughts on playbacks, and we'll work through that portion of it.
Yeah, go.
This collision here is one thing, and then Rui, after he just makes a simple layup, obviously tweaked something in his lower back or something. He is very ginger, and he is not back out on the floor, so we may not see much of Rui again tonight as he is walking very gingerly into the locker room.
That does not look good.
Non-contact, going up for a dunk, immediately coming down weird, and then limping into the locker room. Not returning for the game. Does not look good for Rui. Like it wasn't like a grotesque injury on the court, but that was not a good sign for him.
The last thing you want to see.
Right.
From any player. Non-contact injuries are always the scariest, honestly, because it usually means something really went wrong.
Yep, exactly. People like these athletes know their bodies at the highest level. So when they feel that kind of stuff, it's like, oh shit, something really just happened. So first up, prayers for Rudy. Second up, when we saw that, there was just a massive level of, I want to say confidence, but confidence isn't the right word to describe such situation. But you guys get the point of just knowing that Rui would not be available for this game, and therefore, from a betting perspective, was worth fading the Lakers pretty quickly. Drew, go ahead.
All three of those injuries kind of happened very like bang, 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 right? Where it was Rui had the non-contact injury, and we're like, oh, he's out. And then Hayes went to the locker room not a minute and a half later, and then Luka came up not lame, but limping, maybe 30 seconds after that. Or something. So just cluster injuries, like we're going to see what happens here. And I think you're going to talk about playback. I'm not ready to yet. I want to see what happens.
Well, let's be ready to talk about playback because that's definitely what we have to do. And then we will do the one shot for BetStamp, and then we will get out of here. What's been a loaded Friday show with tons of bets down, lots of strategy that's reviewed through the slate. Drew, playbacks wise, we have 4 units on Clippers as underdogs at various prices, whether that's plus 1.5 or plus 1. They're now out to 4.5 point favorites. What would be your choice for the playback?
I'd love a 5. Now, this was 4.5, 4 last night, so it hasn't moved much more. We've obviously found a bit of a resistance point here at the 4.5. I'm still waiting for that injury news. I would expect books will start moving before we get that injury news officially from like an underdog source or a Twitter source or something of that nature. If there's a team that the books are usually plugged into, it's the Lakers specifically, especially with rumor mill injury reports. Like stuff is going to come out of that camp towards the books a little bit faster than it'll come to the general public, in my opinion. So I'm really interested in watching this line like a hawk. And if we see a movement from the sharper books back to 4, back to 3.5, that's exact like find whatever you can and play back I would consider at least 2 units, if not 2.5, 3 on this number, because you have so many key numbers, right? The 3, the 4, but I really want that 5. So let's just wait a little longer here. Let's see who's at shoot around. Let's see what everybody looks like. Let's see where these lines start going. And if they move to 5, I'm probably still going to be waiting until official news comes out, because then I think if it moves to 5, it's probably news injury wise going to 6, going to 6.5, depending on who's in, who's out. Right. So keep waiting on this one.
If you start seeing 5s come up, you're almost more apt to leave more of it exposed
Yep.
Where if you see if it flashed back to 2, you're like, let me just dump 3/4 of it back and have a 1
immediately.
unit
Yeah.
exposed.
Yep. That is exactly how I
So
would.
we're actually
look
going
at-
to open positive middles here, but we're actually going to do less of the middle if the middle gets better, because we're choosing to ride the closing line value as the predominant position, because it's just so valuable in this spot. A lot of the times when we do 3-unit middles in both directions, that's when there's a discrepancy that offers it at the same time.
Yeah.
But here, when you have 4 units down, you might not want to play all 2, 3, 4 units of it back, because you're also foregoing some of the value acquired. Whereas sometimes when you're just grabbing these middles both at the same time, you're acquiring them both instantly. So it's a different sort of circumstances and situation that makes the amounts that you play back variable to their, said situation. Okay, let's do it for Suns as well, and then let's get out of here. If we're looking at 237.5, and with where lines currently are, Drew, and a 6 and a 5.5 bet, obviously you do have the value playing it back at 7.5 and at 234. How would you go about playing 3 units spread, 1 units total, 1 unit parlay? I will say the parlay is unhedgeable, unbuybackable, unmiddleable. If you have 2 legs and they're going to be, obviously it's an SGP, so they're going to be happening at the exact same time. You're not going to have one leg hit and then know if you can middle or hedge or anything on the second leg. They're both going to be going on. So we are riding the 1 unit on the parlay. So it's really about the 3 units on the spread and the 1 unit on the total, and how you go about those while knowing you also have another full unit of exposure on those legs as parlays.
My plan, I have my bets slightly different than what you have. I have 2 units on the parlay, 2 units on the spread, and 1 unit on the total. My plan is to, obviously, I'm still waiting. We're still waiting for the injury news. When Zion is announced out, which we're 97% sure that he's going to be announced out, I think this line will move to 8.5, maybe even a 9. And if you can get the 9 and play it back, I'm happy to play back the entirety of the spread, at least in my position. Maybe in your case, you only do 2 units. And I'm going to play back the entirety of the total as well, wherever it gets to. I also assume if Zion's out that this will drop to 233, 232.5, something of that nature. So again, waiting, but I am going to play my straight bets all back and open full middles on those and then ride the parlay.
Okay, I think I'm going to play half of those back and ride the parlay.
So even more aggressive. But I guess the parlay, like, because I have 2 units on it instead of...
Right, you have
I've
more
split it.
ceiling on hitting that.
Yeah, so I feel like in my case...
And more natural risk on the other ones too.
Exactly. So
And
that's
you're
something
playing back less and you're foregoing less value because I play the other ones harder.
This is also a
straight.
game, I think, because of our exposure, even with those playbacks, probably a good one to watch live, because you can potentially see, like, let's say the Suns get out to a 20-point lead or something like that, right? But the total is kind of right in that range, right in that sweaty range for your parlay. Can you play back a total in that spot a little bit live to hedge your parlay? Not hedge it, but play back the parlay a smidge.
If you said if Suns are up like 20 and that
like if this is a blowout and the parlay, and it's very clearly like the Suns are up 20 with 5 minutes left in the second quarter and the Pelicans can't do anything on offense, et cetera, right?
Yeah, just be very careful because it could go the other way against you, right? Like there could be a roaring comeback. And if you did it the other direction with saying, okay, maybe the total is 30 points under projection and the Suns are up 5. So maybe I just hedged the Pelicans ATS, like God forbid it goes to overtime. Then there's an extra 5 minutes to put up those 30 points or whatever.
That's true too. I will say occasionally with these parlays, I played back a parlay last night. I don't parlay often, but if books are going to give me boosts on them, I'm going to do them.
Yep. Sometimes,
you know what I mean?
Yes. Sometimes
Because
those are
like and like
absolutely.
I plug my numbers into the parlay calculator and make sure that boost puts it over what the parlay calculator would tell me it is worth.
Right.
Because then you're actually gaining value instead of just
Instead
pseudo
of going
value.
to the clothing store that has a 20% off sale, but really they marked everything up 20%
Yeah,
before the 20%
exactly.
off sale started, so it's all the same price.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well put. Last night I was able to play off of a Lakers spot where I had LeBron under assists, LeBron over 2+ threes, and Lakers money line, and I think it was plus 360 approximately, with I think 8 minutes left in that game. The Wolves had a little bit of a run going. I think it was maybe it was just before Ant went out. Actually, I think is what happened, and I was able to play the money line for the Wolves at plus 1,200 for 1/10 of what my payout would have been on the parlay to lock in that win.
Yep.
And I think that situation could come up again tonight, where if the Suns are up 20, you can look to see if you can find that live alt spread at the number you played it at,
Right.
get the plus odds,
Yep.
and lock in that ticket.
It's an option. Value wise, I would say it's long term probably not smart, because if you're hedging off parlays, a parlay is not a good idea. A hedge is generally not a good idea. So generally stacking two non-good ideas together gets you further in the hole. But there are situationally spots to parlay. This is one of them. There are situationally spots to hedge. There might be one of them. So at least knowing the options, there's always good to have outs and options. There's never, the menu can be 10 items or 20 items, as long as the item that you still want is there. Who cares? Then make it fucking 30 items so that more people can come with you, right?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, if taking those spots, because I'm personally so exposed on that parlay, I don't mind hedging it back at all. It's
exactly.
It's to limit exposure.
Also an exposure thing. Exactly.
Yeah.
Sometimes you do things that are minus EV because it's better for your bankroll health.
Yes.
See, that's why we had a lot of strategy stuff that was going to come at the end of the show.
Perfect.
I hope people made it this long. I appreciate if you do. We will clip the last 4 games as a segment and make it its own weekend podcast. So if you're listening on Saturday and you just caught the back end of this, I hope you caught some things that you would start to pick up on, whether that's matchup hunting and tracking the patterns of line movement like we talked about for Knicks Grizzlies, understanding the injury implications and the history of certain teams with their injury reporting, like the Pelicans choosing not to play Zion and what would their reason to be, whereas the Suns play Kevin Durant and they were talking about him playing the next night already. The Wolves, knowing that Anthony Edwards was near that technical foul limit and still being on the lookout for that the rest of the season. And then Lakers Clippers, if you're watching a game and you see an injury live, like, first thing that you need to do, I'm sorry, it sounds cold-blooded, but the first thing that you need to do is not worry about the guy who's on the ground, but go check the sports book and see if that team has any game priced coming up, or futures priced, or win total markets, or anything like that. Because if you saw something like if Rui was leading comeback player of the year, or what's they don't even have that award. If Rui
or something, yeah,
let's give him his credit. Let's call Rui was lead candidate for MVP right now.
Sure.
And you saw that happen, you might as well go take SGA or Joker.
Pretty much.
So understanding how those things
we did with Wemby, right?
Exactly. I did not rush to the Jared Jackson market or Evan Mobley because I was unsure, but yeah, I rushed to go look.
We know someone who did. Ian in the back.
Oh yeah, Ian found them at 25-1 still, and it hadn't moved yet. And Ian was like,
"What a snag from our man!"
There couldn't have been enough money to put on it. All right, I'm going to take these shots and do the one shot for BetStamp segment, which is quickly becoming 2 or 3 shots on the regular, because all I do is hit them. And so you guys like watching me splash multiple jumpers in a row like I'm Steph Curry, or you just understand that the ball looks like a egg with a tumor, or Hey Arnold's head, and that I deserve an extra shot when I'm shooting against a very unforgiving metal rim. If I make this shot in that hoop, we will pull up the BETSTAMP Pro odds screen, which is the odds screen that I use to help me derive so many of these edges and hunt for this closing line value and go into these cards with such EV tickets. It is partly my basketball knowledge, partly the fact that I'm obsessed with the game, and partly because I don't really want to watch Severance, to be honest. I've been watching it a little bit. I don't think it's that good. We'll do that another time. We'll talk about it another time. Now's not the time. But like all the drama that I need's in the NBA. It has all of the storylines that you could possibly want. You have the comeback, return to action of Cam Thomas tonight. You have a team down their players and trying to battle through adversity, whether that's the Pelicans or potentially the Lakers tonight. You have money on the line with all of the bets and financial incentive. You have revenge matchups with Grizzlies, Knicks. So we have a reality show that happens and a 5-star drama in front of our eyes in the NBA. That's what I will choose to watch. Except tonight, I will not be able to watch it, unfortunately, which really sucks considering all these bets. MJ Moneyline says Fiddle over 0.5 points is the prop that he's betting right now. That's not a long shot because I'm straight cash, homie. Let's get these going. Drew, can you give me a countdown? Because I feel like I was pretty good when we were doing the countdown.
Countdown? All right.
Let me shoot the egg ball.
All right.
And then we'll do a countdown on a good ball.
Okay.
Yeah, that one just comes out of the hand. So weird. It hit the fan. It hit the fan above my head.
Oh, okay.
And really, I just wanted to splash the countdown.
All right. Fiddles. 3 seconds left. Ball in his head. Step back. Jacks it. Ah. The advantage loses.
One more because I'm 2 for 4 this week. And if I were to make it and go 3 for 5 on a given week, I mean, that would be absolutely lit. And he airballs it. That one's the one that's blown up way too much. None of you guys have saw that. Delete the clip. Yeah, delete the clip. Delete the clip. Thank you to everyone for being here. Rick says, I hope Steph is watching. Yeah, he could learn from me. No, I'm kidding. You should hope that I watch Steph. Thank you to everyone for being here. We'll be back next week on Monday with another 5-day week to work through these cards. It was an absolutely dominant week for us. 6 of 7 winning days, plus 7.5 units. Coming into this on 3 straight winners. And when 3 straight winners lose, 3 straight winners. Let's hope that pattern doesn't continue on the day that I have the most bets.
Please no.
So let's get another winner. Let's finish February off strong, and we will see you guys in March. Some words from Patrick Beverley as we say, peace out.
Y'all subscribe to my podcast while y'all asking all these questions. Don't forget to subscribe to the pod. And if you're a kid, listen to your parents. Listen to your parents.
Listen to your parents.
Subscribe to the pod. Subscribe.
Subscribe to the pod. Subscribe to the pod. Subscribe to the pod, man. Good, those are good.